2025 was the year the cycle closes. 9 years of building, collapsing, reckoning, reclaiming, and learning. And through all of that, you were learning who you were underneath it all. It wasn't about what you're releasing, but who you're about to become now that you've made some room. So now that the ground has cleared, the seed is in your hand. What are you about to plant? Hey everybody, it's Mystic Brew, founder of Return to Self, where I help you remember who you were before the world taught you who to be. And this is another episode of Hot Girl Math, where we do some cosmic energetic equations. And I can't believe we finally made it. We're at the end of the time travel series. Today we are going back to last year, 2025, to see what the cosmic clues were that the universe was dropping, what the common themes were throughout the year, and what we were collectively and individually releasing to make room for what is about to bloom now. Let's get started. So you know how this goes. We're going to start off with some numerology, and you may remember that 2025 was a 9-year. Now in numerology, 9 is considered the elder of all of the single digits. It's the number that carries every other number within it. 1 through 8 are all contained within 9's arc. And so this is the number of completion. It's the number of release, of universal wisdom, forgiveness, and the sacred composting of what has been. In numerology, 9 is considered the final chapter of a 9-year cycle, which began back in 2017 when we had our 1 year. If you've been following along, then you know what was going on in 2017. And 2016 was the last 9-year before last year. So from 2016 to 2025, there was a whole cycle, an evolution, something that was coming to a close, which is why we've been going back from 2016 to now, because that was significant for where we are today in another 1 year. 1 years are like an urgent wake-up call to begin again. So what was planted then, back in 2017, grew, collapsed, and was rebuilt through structure, freedom, nurturing, seeking, material reckoning, and in 2025, conclusion. The 9 does not rush, it does not reach, it releases. Relationships that no longer suit us end. Jobs that don't satisfy us get left behind. And the 9-year then gives us an invitation to stop managing endings and start honoring them in its shadow, because as you know now, everything has a shadow state. This is the refusal to let go. This is clinging to what has outlived its purpose, because the release can feel like loss. The 9-year knows that the actual truth is release is just how the new cycle gets some room to breathe. Something else to keep in mind is the major arcana card in tarot with the number 9 is the Hermit. This is the one who climbs the mountain alone with the lamp in hand and doesn't necessarily escape the world, but illuminates the path for all of those who come after them. The energy is contemplative, it's wise, and it goes inward. It's the number of the shaman. It asks, what do you know now that you didn't know 9 years ago? And what needs to be set down before you can carry what comes next. That's why we've been going over each year. That's why I've been giving you the themes and the shadow work prompts, so you can do your own hot girl math on your own to see what's happening in your personal life that is now going to unfold in 2026. So again, the last time the world lived a 9-year was 2016. And as we go through this 9-year in 2025, you may notice some parallels. There's some mirroring from what we talked about in 2016 with 2025. Either way, that entire year began a series. And this is something that is profound when you think about it. because the cycle that you have been prioritizing, studying, experiencing since 2016 has opened and now closed. So what did you learn? You may also remember that 2025 was the year of the wood snake in the Chinese zodiac, and the snake is considered to be the most interior, the most difficult to fully see. In Chinese culture, the snake is simultaneously associated with harvest, wisdom, spirituality, good fortune, and cunning, transformation, deeper mystery that goes beyond the surface. So you can kind of see this duality that's being illustrated with this one animal. People born in snake years are said to be the most intuitive of all the 12 signs. And snakes tend to act according to their own judgments while remaining private. They are determined to accomplish their goals and they hate to fail. They represent the symbol of wisdom and are great thinkers, and complex problems are stimulating to them. The wood element softens that snake's cool reserve with creativity, growth, flexibility, and a genuine thirst for connection. So these may have been themes that you experienced in 2025. It's also connected to 2024, which if you watch that video, we talked about 2024 being the year of the dragon. The snake in Chinese culture is known as the little dragon. So there is a connection there. The mighty dragon of 2024, it has that same element, but it's a little more underground in the unseen, with like a patience of the creature that moves without legs and sheds its skin when it's time to become something new. So again, the shedding of the skin for a 9-year because you're about to move into a 1-year, which is new beginnings. That rebirth and renewal. So what was going on in the sky in 2025? Well, as you probably have guessed, a lot. First of all, we had Neptune entering Aries on March 30th. Now, Neptune had been in Pisces since 2012, swimming in the deep waters of the zodiac in its home sign for 13 years. When it's in that energy, ideals become very much the stuff of action for the next 14 years. And this is the time to either like put up or shut up across society. Again, Aries energy. When there is social vision that is illusionary or just wishful thinking, this can create a lot of generational regret and error. And I want to note that, again, this is another do-si-do type of experience, because the outer planets, when they're about to shift signs, because again, as I've mentioned, they stay there for so long, they do, again, a little cha-cha before they fully enter the next sign. So you get a taste of the energy before it fully moves in. Now, the beautiful thing about Neptune in Aries is when it's well defined, it can leave a legacy of spiritual and social uplift. So Neptune moved from Pisces, the sign of dissolution, imagination, and the ocean of collective emotion, into Aries, which is the sign of the self, the pioneer, the leader, the fire of that individual will. This is like the dreamer picking up a weapon. This is the spiritual impulse becoming a political one, and we're seeing that today. This is the artist becoming the activist. And as always, we have to be mindful with that, because the shadow is that Aries in its shadow state has a lot of aggression. This can be filtered through Neptune's tendency toward delusion, creating conditions for spiritual propaganda, politics, culty politics, and wars that are fought in the name of ideals. So there does need to be some groundedness here, as well as what I keep telling you, being mindful that you are not becoming the very thing that you claim to hate, just in a different outfit. This energy is all about staying grounded and resisting the allure of spiritual or political propaganda so that you don't get lost in the sauce, basically. Because again, Neptune can be really elusive. It can be foggy. It can create a sense of not really being able to see what's going on. So you got to be rooted as you move through this energy. Now, Neptune retrograded back into Pisces later in 2025, offering a brief and final integration before its permanent move into Aries earlier this year in 2026. And joining Neptune was Saturn. Saturn was also in Pisces since 2023, dissolving structures, demanding spiritual accountability, surfacing the grief that we could no longer bypass. And then Saturn crossed into Aries for a hot second, which is asking for action. When Saturn is in Aries, we're being invited to bring the inspiration, the creativity, the passion, and the desire of that Aries energy into a tangible, long-form, committed devotion. That's how you build over time. So Saturn in Aries demands a greater sense of personal authority. It demands self-responsibility and courage and resilience. It teaches us how to become the master of our destiny. So like Neptune, Saturn retrograded back into Pisces later in the year, giving a preview of what's to come before fully entering Aries in 2026. And yet another transit that happened in 2025 that is significant right now is Uranus entering Gemini in July of 2025. Uranus had been in Taurus since 2019. Disrupting material systems, supply chains, financial architecture, reproductive rights, and even just the physical earth. Now, in July of 2025, it moved into Gemini, the sign of communication, information, duality, and the mind. This was another preview where it did a little do-si-do. It gave you a taste of what this energy looks like before it returned to Taurus in November. But we just had Uranus enter Gemini for real, for good. So this is going to bring a sense of urgency and a bit of unpredictability to how we exchange ideas, how we connect with others, and how we adapt to new ways of thinking. This is like fluctuating media landscapes, revolutionary messaging, sudden disruptions in journalism, social media, publishing, and even the entire nervous system of collective information. When Uranus, which is quite rebellious, enters Gemini, which is a Mercury-ruled sign, it shakes up mass communications and brings revolutionary messages to the collective airwaves. The last time Uranus was in Gemini was 1942 to 1949, and this was the time of wartime propaganda, atomic science, the dawn of television, and the post-war reshaping of information landscape. So we're seeing hints of this already, and Uranus just moved into Gemini. And my prediction with this transit is we're going to prioritize an analog lifestyle. I think a lot of us are really sick of the just constant digital fixation. I think a lot of us are ready to go outside to be with nature again. Our nervous systems are begging for it. And especially with the rise of AI and just the things that we are seeing on social media, like it's not conducive to the health of society. So that's my prediction. Maybe get a landline, start handwriting letters to people, like get back into, and this is another thing I wanted to mention too. Whenever we talk about like, oh, is there going to be like a digital collapse? Are they going to shut down the digital? I don't know. But here's what I can tell you. It doesn't have to be like the scariest experience. Like, why can't we just go back to 1995? You know what I'm saying? Like every time we talk about it, it's like, oh, now we're going to be like back in the old days where we're just like hunting for light and whatever. It's like, why does it have to be so dramatic? Like, why can't we just go back to the 90s where it's like dial-up internet? So you're not on it all the fucking time. There's no necessarily streaming, just every movie you can think of, every TV show. I think we pendulum swung into this overfixation, just so many things at once that we no longer value these things. You don't even know your best friend's phone number. Let's be real. And if everything did collapse, would you be able to write to them? Would you be able to call them? No. So let's go back to the 90s. Let's get those address books out. Let's get a landline. Let's start writing letters. Let's write down our people's addresses and phone numbers. Like, let's connect in a way that is not always dependent on this. Anyway, Jupiter was also in Gemini through May and then moved into Cancer in June. So this was Jupiter completing its tour from 2024 in Gemini, amplifying information, communication, and multiplying narratives until it moved into Cancer on June 9th, which Jupiter in Cancer is really comfortable. Like, that's its exalted sign, meaning it's not just operating comfortably, it's like heightened. Think of it like when you're home, you're comfortable, you can operate, you know what to do, everything's cool. But then you go to like your best friend's house or your lover's house or wherever it is where you feel amped up, like you just have more energy. There's something around that atmosphere that turns you up a bit. That's Jupiter in Cancer. So this gives us expansive, abundant, generous energy that flows really freely. And in Cancer, this expands home, family, emotional roots, nourishment, belonging, and the care of those who cannot care for themselves. This is a once in a 12-year event. So follow your heart, be emotionally vulnerable, and the cosmos will then return that expansiveness with wishes amplified. Jupiter's still in Cancer right now, by the way, but it's going to move into Leo in the summer, so you can still utilize this energy. In 2025, the eclipse axis also shifted fully into Virgo and Pisces, which we touched on in the last video. 3 of the year's 4 eclipses were on this axis. And again, the Virgo-Pisces axis governs healing, service, spiritual practice, the integration of body and soul with that Virgo energy, and the discernment between real compassion and illusion. After years of moving through Aries and Libra, which again we touched on, self and other, we were now being asked, where are you being called to serve? And are you taking care of yourself well enough to actually be of use? One of the shadows with Pisces is that savior complex. It's being the martyr. It is overgiving to the point where you're not really giving anymore. The thing that you claim to praise and prioritize and value, you can't even do because you're not valuing yourself. You're not valuing your limits. So let's get into some national news, shall we? Similar to 2016, at the top of 2025, Donald Trump was inaugurated as the 47th president on January 20th. The second president ever to serve 2 non-consecutive terms and the oldest person at 78 to win the office. Not that you asked, but we need an age cap, and I'm thinking it should be like 20 years earlier than that. Within hours of taking office, he signed a cascade of executive orders because, of course, he did. The administration moved immediately and aggressively on immigration, with ICE agents arresting individuals at workplaces, schools, and even homes. Cell phone videos of agents forcing people into unmarked cars went viral over social media, and the administration created detainment centers, including Alligator Alcatraz in Florida. In June, Trump deployed the National Guard to Democratic-led cities, including Los Angeles, Chicago, Washington, D.C., Portland, and Memphis. The largest domestic military mobilization since 1992, citing a need to deter violent crime and protect federal immigration facilities. Trump also returned to tariffs with a lot of force, saying a flat 10% on nearly all imports, rising beyond 50% for China, Canada, and Mexico, and reaching 104% on Chinese exports. China retaliated with severe export controls on rare earth minerals, which were critical to the manufacture of everything from cars to weapons, and that sent shockwaves through the global supply chains, as you can imagine. On June 14th, the No Kings protest drew more than 5 million participants across the United States and other countries, one of the largest protest movements in American history. Demonstrations erupted against Trump's deployment of military forces in American cities and what protesters described as authoritarian overreach. You may also recall, especially if you're an LA native, that the Los Angeles wildfires erupted on January 7th of 2025 and continued for a month, destroying more than 16,000 structures, burning tens of thousands of acres across Pacific Palisades and Eaton Canyon in Altadena. It killed 30 people and generated an estimated $76 to $131 billion in losses, one of the costliest disasters in American history. Again, breaking a lot of records every year, and not necessarily great ones. Los Angeles also saw sweeping ICE raids in June that sparked days of unrest and protesters blocking freeways and clashing with police. Taylor Swift keeps coming up every year. In 2025, she bought back the rights to her first 6 albums, ending the defining ownership battle of her career and completing a narrative arc that had consumed her public life for nearly a decade. And the U.S. government shutdown that began in November of 2025 became the longest in U.S. history. Another fun fact and record. Freezing the government, closing national parks, and leaving 800,000 federal workers without pay. Republicans refused to negotiate an extension of expiring Affordable Care Act subsidies. Democrats refused to pass funding bills that excluded health insurance extensions, and so that stalemate deepened as the year closed. Now, internationally, after nearly 2 years, a fragile ceasefire between Israel and Hamas took effect in October of 2025, brokered through intensive U.S., Qatar, Turkish, and Egyptian mediation. The Biden administration had negotiated an earlier ceasefire in January that collapsed in mid-March when the two sides disagreed on extension terms. The October ceasefire laid out a 3-phase peace plan. By December, the truce remained fragile, with sporadic violations and accusations from both sides. The recorded death toll in Gaza since October of 2023 reached 70,937, with over 171,000 injured. Israel, meanwhile, dramatically expanded the geographic scope of its military operations in 2025, conducting strikes in at least 6 different countries, including a 12-day military offensive against Iran in June. Russia and Ukraine remained at war, entering the conflict's 4th year. Ukraine stunned the world in June with Operation Spiderweb, a covert drone strike deep into Russian territory that hit 5 air bases simultaneously. Trump pushed Zelensky towards ceasefire terms many experts characterized as heavily tilted toward Russia. Europe agreed at year's end to provide Kiev a $105 billion loan. India and Pakistan fought their most intense military exchange in half a century in May of 2025, involving drone and missile strikes, fighter jets, and the destruction of air defense systems around Lahore. A ceasefire was reached after 3 days. Trump claimed to have mediated it. India disputed that, and the incident strained U.S.-India relations. So even then, and I'd have to double check the dates, but you're seeing this Aries energy bubble up. Aries is the sign of the warrior. And right now, these planets that did a little tap into Aries are fully engulfed in Aries. And we've talked about that plenty. So you can see the energy that's coming up. On April 21st of 2025, Pope Francis died. On May 8th, Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost was elected as Pope Leo the 14th. Sorry, I had to read that Roman numeral in my mind. It's just, anyway, the first American pope in the history of the Roman Catholic Church, a Chicago native. Also, Chicago has been coming up every single day. And I'm like, do I need to go to Chicago, or is something about to happen with Chicago? I don't know. Stay tuned. Either way, this election generated global attention, reverence, and because this was 2025, an avalanche of Midwest-inflected memes. Da Pope, Chicago Pope, and whether he preferred the Cubs or White Sox was debated with genuine intensity. I must say, from what I've seen so far, big fan of this Pope. Big fan. He's the best. In Nepal, there was a Gen Z-led protest movement that toppled the elected government in September. This followed the Sri Lanka and Bangladesh models of youth-driven democratic uprising, and this was triggered by a government ban on 26 social media platforms, including Facebook, YouTube, and WhatsApp. What about pop culture? Well, you may recall Kendrick Lamar's Super Bowl halftime show, which was quite a statement. The first solo hip-hop artist and Pulitzer Prize winner to do so. His grin, the pause, the bootcut jeans, it became a pop culture moment. And weeks later, Drake's lawyers cited the Super Bowl performance in his defamation lawsuit against Universal Music Group. Kendrick subsequently won Song of the Year and Record of the Year at the Grammys. Speaking of the Grammys, here we go with some Beyonce news again. She won Best Album for Cowboy Carter, becoming the first Black woman to win the top Grammy prize in the 21st century. Members of the Los Angeles Fire Department presented her with the trophy, connecting the album's cultural reclamation to the ongoing devastation of the LA fires in a moment of genuine, unscripted emotional weight. And Beyonce has now become the most awarded and nominated artist in Grammy history. Meanwhile, Anora, Sean Baker's Brooklyn set film about a sex worker who marries an oligarch's son, swept the Oscars, with Mikey Madison winning Best Actress, and Adrian Brody won Best Actor for The Brutalist, a film about a Holocaust-surviving Hungarian architect navigating post-war America. Both films were about what it costs to survive in a system designed to consume people, and neither could have been more timely. The surprise hit of the year came from K-pop Demon Hunters, which was an animated film about a K-pop trio defending the human world from demons through catchy pop music. That became a Netflix phenomenon and spawned sing-along screenings reminiscent of the Eras Tour film event. For months, Americans were emotionally preparing, this sounds crazy, but it's true, for TikTok's death in 2025. Influencers posted tearful farewell videos, myself included, and I am not ashamed, because let me tell you why. TikTok was the first social media platform, and I was super anti-TikTok in the beginning. Like, I hate everything until I don't. It's just, I don't know what to tell you. But my friend kept she was like, you got to get on TikTok. You would be great on TikTok. I was like, I'm not freaking doing another platform. I don't care. And then I got on TikTok, and that was the first platform where I felt like I could truly be who I am, and I can talk about weird shit, and I can be weird, and I can do my readings, and I can just share my thoughts and my channels and my downloads and all of these different things that I never felt comfortable sharing with the world because I was always criticized and judged for it. And yet here was a huge community of people who not only accepted me the way that I am, but acknowledged it and validated it and praised it and admired it, and it was healing for me. So yeah, I cried saying goodbye to TikTok, and then I didn't even end up leaving. I did go to Red Note, like a lot of other people, which was very interesting. I learned some things over there. But, then the deadline happened with TikTok and nothing actually happened, but we did get that memo and things got a little weird. Trump repeatedly delayed the ban and then brokered a deal in September to transfer the majority ownership to American investors, because of course he did. The entire arc became the year's defining parable about digital panic, regulatory theater, and the impossibility of governing platforms that are genuinely woven into the fabric of daily life. And I just gotta say, this is very narcissistic behavior. It's dangling something in front of you, giving you news that they know will create stress or sadness or whatever else, and be like, you know what, never mind. It's a control tactic. It's a power tactic, and we need to make note of this. After Jimmy Kimmel made jokes following the death of conservative media personality Charlie Kirk, ABC abruptly suspended his show. Conservative outrage collided with free speech concerns. Protesters gathered outside Disney Studios, and Kimmel returned a week later to thunderous applause, addressing the controversy directly. The episode crystallized the year's cultural battle over who gets to be talked about, who gets protection, and what corporate broadcast decisions in a politically charged environment actually reveal about power. Lastly, Blue Origin launched an all-women crew in what was heavily marketed as a historic feminist space moment, featuring Katy Perry, journalist Gayle King, aerospace engineer Aisha Bowe, and Lauren Sanchez, Jeff Bezos' now wife. At that time, I don't know if they were married yet. The reception was complicated. Many people found the spectacle of billionaire-adjacent women going to space in a year of record wildfires and Gaza famine to be a particularly unsubtle example of the gap between the so-called elite and the earthly crisis. Perry sang "What a Wonderful World" on the way down, and let's just say the internet had their opinions. It was a little bit tone deaf, if you ask me, because it's just like, we didn't ask for this. Like, I can see how people might think this would be inspiring and motivating. These women just went to space, and sure, but there's a lot of other shit going on right now that needs to be dealt with. Like, we don't need all that. And how much money did you just spend doing that? Priorities. So as always, what were the three themes that were coming up with everything we were seeing? The first is this great release, right? That numerology with the 9. Everything in 2025 circled around the same truth, which was that which has outlived its purpose cannot be held indefinitely, no matter how much energy is devoted to holding it. The 9 years medicine was everywhere. The Gaza ceasefire was the world finally releasing a grip on a war that had consumed 2 years and 70,000 lives. Fragile, imperfect, arrived late, but arrived. Did they listen? No, but it's like, what are we going to do about this? Then we have Assad Syria, which had been releasing its grip since December of 2024, still being in the process of becoming something else. Pope Francis died, and the Catholic Church released one era of leadership and found improbably a Chicago-born American with a Wordle habit that became a lot of people's favorite pope. Taylor Swift completed the release of her own creative history from the hands of the people who had taken it from her. And the snake year's skin shedding was both literal and collective. Old identities, old regimes, old assumptions about permanence were being molted from every direction. The 9 year asked us what was ready to go, and the invitation was to trust that the composting of what is finished is not loss, but preparation. The second thing we saw is this line between dream and propaganda. Again, Neptune moving into Aries, even though it was brief, began immediately delivering the shadow. The planet of illusion and idealism in the sign of individual will and forceful action creates the conditions for wars fought in the name of visions, political movements that function like religions, and the weaponization of hope. The U.S. tariff policy was described in terms of manufacturing revival and American sovereignty, a Neptunian dream of national renewal in an Aries package of aggressive individual action. The immigration crackdown was enacted in the language of safety and civilization. The Iran strikes were framed as protective and preventative. The No Kings protests were equally suffused with Neptunian energy. Millions of people in the streets, united by a feeling more than necessarily a specific policy, fighting for something they could feel, but sometimes struggled to articulate. The wood snake's wisdom, calm, observant, seeing beneath the surface, was the year's essential antidote to this. The capacity to feel the energy of a vision without losing the ability to evaluate it clearly. In a year when both authoritarianism and resistance dressed themselves in the language of righteousness, discernment became the most radical act. And that is why so many of us were positioned to strengthen our discernment, to sharpen our discernment, and to help teach others about discernment, because discernment is going to be key moving forward. Lastly, we saw a theme of completion as the beginning of something unimaginable. The 9-year and the year of the wood snake together kept delivering the same message. The thing that is ending is not the tragedy. The tragedy is refusing to let it end. And woven into every ending of 2025 was the barely visible seed of what comes next. Pluto is finally in Aquarius. Neptune is giving a little preview of Aries. Uranus is giving a little touch of Gemini. Saturn is approaching Aries. Jupiter is in its exaltation in Cancer. Every outer planet repositioning simultaneously. This is a cosmic gear shift of a scale that astrologers can only call genuinely historic. The world of 2016 through 2025, from the fire monkey that we talked about at the beginning of this series, was a great unraveling through all of the structures built and collapsed and reckoned with in between. This was completing the 9-year arc. The next cycle, which began this year, 2026, with a 1 year, is giving us the invitation of, what are you going to do with these seeds? The skin shed has fertilized the ground, and the year was not an ending. It was a sacred preparation for what none of us can yet fully see, but are completely engulfed in now. Before we get into your shadow work reflective questions for the year of 2025, as you know, I pulled an activation card for 2025 and asked what was the collective activation, and we got empowerment with the number 26. The frequency of empowerment supports our ability to show up fully and completely, uniting us with others in the deep trust that we are all connected through the same source. And what came through as I was reading that was we had to go through all of this. We had to see what was not working in order to show up in a way that actually promotes the life in the world that we claim to want to build. Like I tell people when I do shadow work with them, when you ask for something, the first thing you're going to get is the shadow. You're going to be shown everything that is blocking it from being your reality. That's what we have been collectively experiencing. Oh, you want a world that does this? You want a world that honors this? You want people to be taken care of? Okay, well, here's everything that's in the way. Do something about it. Anyway, let's look at the guidebook and see what it says. Empowerment refers to the process of enabling or giving power to, and we typically associate power with strength. In the new energy, however, strength not only refers to the totality of everything that makes us strong on the outside, like our physical form and shape, but includes the inner qualities of wisdom, balance, flexibility, adaptability, and courage. Our true power is deeply rooted in our knowing of who we are, our connection to source and self. When we are clear about who we are, we can be clear about what we are here to do. The clarity is empowering. I just told you that. In the empowerment image, we see human shapes with their arms over their heads, referring to the state of completeness that every human can reach on their own. They also show us the power of our connection. Because we are all connected to the same source, we can overcome any perceived differences and combine our power toward a more conscious reality. What a beautiful way to end this series. Am I right? Of course I am. So let's get into your shadow work reflective questions. As always, if you want some extra credit, if you are a straight A student, I have some extra questions for you to dive a little deeper on my Substack linked below. Ooh, confirmation burp. Someone, you got to do it. Anyway, number 1. What were you still carrying that was ready to be set down in 2025? Again, the 9-year and the wood snake both asked you to stop managing your endings and start honoring them. Number 2, where was your vision for yourself coming from? Neptune in Aries is idealism meeting force, and it asks you, how carefully are you examining the stories that are motivating your life? The wood snake sees through the surface, but can you? And lastly, what were you being cleared for? The 9-year exists so that the 1-year has room. You cannot carry everything you've accumulated over the 9 years into what comes next and also receive it fully. So the question isn't just what is ending, it's what the ending is making room for. I appreciated this journey. I did this because I got the download that this is what I needed to do with this channel first. But I will also be transparent with you that I didn't always enjoy it. I don't like reading. I don't like scripting. I'm a live TV kind of gal. I am in the moment. I'm going to wing it because I channel. And so I like to just have conversations because I always know that whatever needs to be said is going to come through and be said. So there's a part of me that is very excited to now move into some chit chat, just some conversation, some dialogue, some channeling to deliver whatever messages are being asked to come through. However, I will also say that this was great practice for me. I really appreciate the 10 of you who've been watching every week. I am just following the guidance. I don't care if one person gets something from this, then that's more than I could anticipate for, and I'm grateful for that. I do feel like I had to freshen up on my broadcast journalism degree because I don't know, you probably don't know. How would you know? I went to school to become a news anchor, believe it or not. I thought that was going to be my life. So maybe now that I told you that, you can pick up on it in the videos. But at the same time, that's not really me. Part of the reason I didn't do that is because there is a level of expression that I value within myself, and I want to be able to play. I want to be able to be authentic and be myself. And I learned very quickly that in a newsroom, that's not always the case. So I am excited to be a little bit more myself with you in the following videos. And I thank you so much for your time and your willingness to time travel with me through this series up until this point. Thank you so much. I will see you next week when we just start shooting the shit together because there's a lot to talk about.